Welcome to Innisfail Accelerates, a podcast about the people and technology transforming one Ontario town. Today, we're talking about communication. It's easy to get annoyed with your local government. It's the level of government that most affects regular people on a daily basis. Things like potholes and property taxes, business licenses and zoning laws. Part of the problem is that municipalities haven't done a great job of keeping up with how people communicate these days. A monthly newsletter sent in the mail just isn't going to cut it anymore. And that problem has come into even sharper relief since the pandemic. So the Town of Innisfil issued a challenge at a recent event. The town asked the people and companies working in and around DMZ Innisfil to help solve a series of problems. One of those challenges was to create a portal to enable the town to communicate with residents digitally instead of relying on snail mail. That got Tristan Tsvetanov and Katznelson thinking. Still in university, the pair were intrigued at the idea of creating a communications platform for local government, one that was easy and useful. So they set to work on a software solution, one that was so compelling that they were awarded a town contract to bring the plan to life. The result was Communicaty, a company with big plans for the future.
One of the things me and Tristan, when we're looking at business and balancing that with our studies, what we're doing is we're applying what we're learning. I think like both of us are doers, and just learning about like marketing in the classroom, sales in the classroom, software in the classroom is just not something that you can do without actually going out and doing that in the real world. And I think that's kind of where both of our passion comes from, to actually go out and alongside the study, like why wait till we're out of school? Just jump into something and see where it goes.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about that, about trying to balance those two things, because they're both incredibly time intensive, especially building out a business, and then to try and have to do schoolwork as well. Like, do you ever sleep?
Not as much as I'd like to be honest, but we're really where the rubber hits the road kind of guys. So we try to balance, but also like harmonize school with our work. So for example, next semester I have a sales course coming up. And that sales course should give me some foundational ability to go out and sell better for Communicaty as well. And through the course, we build out like a sales playbook, and that's something that we'll be able to use and derive value from in our business while still getting a grade for it. So it's trying to find opportunities where we get to match both of our education with our business pursuits that we look for.
In terms of your relationship, tell me how that developed, because oftentimes you'll find, startups and entrepreneurs, it's a fairly solo existence, and they, people tend to be more independent minded. Talk to me about building a relationship and a partnership to do this, because if it works well, I can imagine it's incredibly beneficial just to be able to have someone to knock ideas off of. But just talk to me about like building your guys' relationship and in turn building the company together.
Yeah, I think me and Tristan quickly identified each other. So we were in a business class together in second year, and that class was contribution based. So we didn't actually like formally meet until the year after, but we kind of had a feel for each other, like what we were thinking, and it seemed to align pretty well. And then the next year we were actually slotted into the same class at Ivy at the business school. And we had an assignment together, and we were just talking, and it quickly became apparent that like we were going to start a company together at some point. It was just like, when is that going to happen? Like, when is the opportunity going to come? And so from then on, like we had our ears to the ground looking for opportunities, and this one just came and sprang up.
When you're talking about building a business together, what were the models that you were looking at and thinking, oh, that is something I'd like to emulate? Like, were you looking at the Elons of the world, that kind of Silicon Valley model, or just entrepreneurialism in general? Can you just talk to me about that?
I think both of us, what we really like is we like cash flow. We like money in, money going out, and we're more like value and fundamental guys. We're not so much on, build a sky high valuation, grow at all costs and then profit will come later. It's more about a traditional way of business for us of like, how can we find something that first solution problem fit? Does our solution actually fit a certain problem that a customer is having? And then from there, can we do this profitably? Will someone pay for it? And then kind of building up from there. So it's really a first principles approach that we both had. And that was something that before we even started Communicaty that we aligned on. And I knew Roy was on the same page I was. And that's kind of how we decided to start a business before we even had an idea.
Yeah, like when we would speak about the businesses that we liked the businesses that were bringing in like cash flows that were predictable, that were like doing something that was irreplaceable in the market. And the ideas were floating around, obviously, like from the investing side, we were kind of aligned with our investing philosophies as we were kind of learning about this. And then from the tech side, just those software as a service businesses that are predictable, but providing a product that is just so necessary, like the AWSs of the world.
So can you talk to me about Communicaty and how it developed around the hackathon and how this idea of kind of building something, using that philosophy of building a really fundamental company that can help people, how that gelled with the hackathon and this idea?
So what kind of happened was that hackathon came across my inbox. So I was a part of the DMZ last summer. I spent some time in their Basecamp program getting started. And then I still was on their email chain, and over time they sent me an email about this DMZ hackathon. And then all of a sudden DMZ hackathon with Innisfil came out. So it was really a pleasant surprise. And this was just in the early days of COVID still. So we're all sitting at home, trying to get something to do. And it was like, hey, Roy, what are you doing this week? And then all of a sudden we started looking at some of the problems they had talked about. And Innisfail had released 5 problem statements. And that's how we really got started. We fell in love with this communications problem that they had. And when you think about it, like the only way that a municipality can reach its citizens en masse and targeted is by mail. And once we kind of like had this really fundamental, simple insight, it's like, wow, there's so much that could be done here. And that's how we got started with the hackathon and with Innisfil.
And how was the problem initially posed to you by the town? Like, what was the problem they were trying to solve?
Yeah, so they had identified a problem where earlier in the year, they had a sewage backup. And it was like affecting an area, but the officials didn't know exactly which houses were affected. And by the time they got these like letters out to let everybody know that this was happening, it would have been too late. And they wanted something that could be instant, but could be targeted and in like a geographical region. And for us, it was just a no-brainer. Like there should be a way to access like residents in a town, in a city, through a portal or communications platform that's not like mail, that doesn't take a week to come, but can still be meaningful to you based on where you're located. And since that, we've expanded it further, but the first iteration of the product was really, can we do mail better than mail through like a text message or an email?
And that must have been really surprising to you that such a service doesn't already exist for municipalities. I mean, it's 2020. You think about other kinds of systems that have been in play for, over a decade now, like for the Amber Alert system, for example. And there's other kinds of systems that operate at, like, say, the federal or even provincial level, but there just isn't that at the municipal or local level, is there? And that's sort of the hole you're trying to plug here.
What we've actually seen is there are a few alternative options for those really emergency events that towns can adopt, but what we noticed was very low adoption of these technologies and kind of barriers to use for both the municipality and the residents. And I think that's where we wanted to bring in something that would actually be a joy to use from a design perspective, and just minimize that friction to actually have that channel to your residents, but not have it be something that's like annoying. Like nobody really wants to be getting 8-10 alerts a day that have nothing to do with you. You want it to be personalized and to come in to something that you care about.
So talk to me about actually building the kind of the infrastructure for the company. Like, did you have to kind of get a better understanding of what the town needed and try to build out the logistics of getting that to the people who need it? And just kind of, I know there's a lot there, but can you walk me through that process? Because it seems like it could be like really complicated. You could get lost in the weeds pretty easily.
Yeah. So what happened, which was kind of unique here, is usually you build a product, you come up with an idea, and then you go try to find a customer. But in this case, the customer found us, and they had known the problem that they were trying to take on, and that was Innisfil. So what happened from the beginning is we had the ability to really empathize with what they're going through, what kind of problem they needed to solve. And we just started building the most simple solution that we could think of to their most simple problem, which was targeting people by location, but then using modern contact methods like email or text message or voice call rather than mail. So when we started, it was really building from the ground up. And getting the infrastructure in place relied on a couple things. Is I put my software background to work, and it was building out a minimum viable product that we could both see and share with the town. And then once we kind of got on the same page, and the magic moment was really when we sent the first text message out. So we had put our information into the system, and we have two sides to the system. There's the resident portal and the resident experience, and then there's the public communication and official experience. So we put our information on the resident side, and from the municipal side, we were able to send out a message to that phone, and that was it. That's when we knew we had something pretty magical here.
It's kind of a dumb question, but how do you get access to everybody's mobile cell numbers in a particular jurisdiction? I imagine there's got to be some privacy issues there that you got to contend with.
Right?
Yeah. So privacy has been actually one of like the core things that we really think about on a day-to-day basis. So there were a few frameworks that we looked up when we were actually developing the system. So it was privacy by design, kind of there's these principles that you want to incorporate into your product if you're trying to make it private and safe, which is what we were trying to do for this like thing that would be used for in the public good. But the key difference between our system and something like an Amber Alert system is our system is completely opt-in. It's completely in control of the resident, to the point where we've actually made it easier for the resident to opt out if they're getting like annoyed and whatnot, and we would delete their information. But it's completely self-serve. So you would come into the portal, you'd enter your information in. That's where you put your phone number and your address, and and we link that. And you can give us as much information as you want, ideally, and then we can use whatever you give us to then get that message to you. So it's really centered around the customer or the resident experience, and it makes sure that people have control over their own data. So like every time you get a message, there's going to be like you get an email alert from us, there's going to be a button that says, I want to opt out of this particular alert stream, or I want to get rid of this information because I don't want to use this anymore. And we're completely fine with that. Like the success of the product is going to be the satisfaction of the resident. And so that's what we kind of built our product around, and just go from there.
What were the biggest hurdles that you came across while trying to build this out? Or was it, I mean, it's all come together fairly quickly. And as you mentioned, you've already deployed like a minimal viable product. But what were the biggest stumbling blocks along the way that maybe you didn't expect when we started out in this process?
I think part of it was balancing, iterating the product with our school loads. So just to give a little bit of a timeline, we got into this agreement to do this pilot with Innisfail, where we would be using it, they would be using it internally, giving us feedback. And it was really that iteration process that's been kind of an ongoing marathon, where we release some new feature, they come back with their feedback and their test cases, and then we make the adjustments on our end, and then we do it again. And part of that has been what I think has made our product so unique and so tailored to the municipality experience. But the other part of that was constantly being on top of these changes. Like if you look at the product at its most minimal form in those first weeks of the hackathon to where we are now, you wouldn't like, they don't even look like they're the same platform.
And talk to me about scaling it up. Like, do you have visions of trying to get this in other municipalities across Canada, North America, Europe?
So what we'd really love is that if you're a resident and you let's say you have a cottage property, your kids go to school, you have a work address and you have a home address, is you could put that all into one platform, and then that could be shared across all the different municipalities you might be engaging with. So it's making an even better resident experience. And that's part of the scaling up, is when we go from just launching in Innisfil to launching it in potentially other municipalities, is how can we start to connect the data across? And that's where we can create like a really powerful network effect of the residents, and we're able to make it an even better experience for them. At the core of it is the resident experience, is what we believe. Is if they're satisfied, that's the government's job. The government's job is to provide a better experience for their citizens. So if we can make the best resident experience combined with one of the best municipal experiences, that's where we'll be able to create a lot of value and hopefully scale up along those two lines.
Just thinking about what you were saying there about the networking of government, local government with residents, it has some exciting additional possibilities, right, in terms of local democracy, the structures of which are kind of ossified and date from like almost a 19th century kind of model that just is wildly outdated for the way that most people get information now. And you think about trying to update those interactions between government and citizens in a more effective, more timely manner. This could really help to change democracy in a way. I know that's kind of big thinking here, but I'm sure you guys have talked about these sorts of possibilities for just making government more accountable and even just be able to listen to the people more effectively.
Yeah, for sure. So I think we're entering into this new phase that's actually been accelerated by the pandemic of just digitizing government processes, making them more efficient, but also increasing the resident experience that they actually get when interacting with the government. So we've seen like a wave of growth in government technology in the US. And I think Innisfil has been really smart to bring that trend that's happening in the US right now and bring it to Canada. I think actually Innisfil is going to become that hub for the government technology scene. And like they're doing that now with bringing in the companies, but I think like there's a lot of interest from venture capital as well. I know that there's some specific government technology funds in the US that only specialize in companies like ours. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see, because as everything becomes more kind of isolated when everybody's on lockdown or staying at home and you don't get those community aspects in person, there's going to be that supplementary service that's going to happen digitally. And we're already seeing that like all over North America and even in Europe as well.
The other thing to bring up too is like all the different levels of government, how they interact. You know, you have the federal level, the provincial level, upper tier municipalities, lower tier municipalities. I mean, I didn't know the difference before starting this, but now I could tell you, you know, like York Region would be an upper tier, Aurora would be a lower tier. And that kind of environment is hard for people to understand sometimes. It's like, what level of government are they interacting with for what and who? And that's where the complexity comes in. And if we're able to, again, help centralize some of the way the citizen interfaces with the different levels of government, that's also part of what we really want to see going forward.
And as if you guys aren't busy enough, you've also launched SafePass, which is a compliance tool, like a COVID compliance tool for businesses. How does that work? I mean, it's kind of on a similar model here to Communicaty, but talk to me about SafePass and what the impetus was for that and how it works.
So COVID compliance is maybe the wrong name for it. We'll call it small business contact tracing is really what it is. We started off as a COVID compliance tool because we didn't really know what to call it back in the beginning of the early days of the pandemic. But what we've really discovered is that businesses would have a lot of pieces of paper stacking up. Every person who came in the door, they'd ask, questions, do you have symptoms? Or they're trying to collect contact information, and then we're all sharing the same pencil or pen. It was it was a mess. And it was something that we didn't want to see happen. So once we learned of this, it was how can we take our existing technology and kind of apply it into a different space. So within a week, we got SafePass up and running from some of the existing Communicaty infrastructure, and we were able to get that off the ground and start trying it out in a couple small businesses and small restaurants. And the whole idea is to, number one, is capture that contact information for people coming in and create a very easy experience all on your own personal device. So the customer would come in, they would scan a QR code, just like you would possibly a menu at a restaurant nowadays. And then we can link through our COVID questionnaire, our contact data collection. And then from there, we could push them to a website or to a menu or to the next piece of the experience.
How's it worked so far? And what do you think are the possibilities for something like that going forward? It doesn't feel like we're coming to the end of this anytime soon. Or what do you think about in terms of the rollout of that product and how its lifespan, I guess, given the current emergency?
Yeah, I think the lifespan of the product is interesting, but one of the things that we really wanted to think about when we were building it was how can we make this as frictionless as possible. So we had different options for contact tracing coming out at the federal level, like the COVID Alert app, but we really didn't see that as something that could gain enough adoption for it to be useful. And so for us, we wanted something that would be that you can use without a contact, without an account, without an app. You would just come in, you can scan it on your phone. Whatever information you put in at that moment is the only thing that's going to be saved to then be passed on to a public health unit in the case of an emergency that happens at that restaurant or whatnot. And this would really cover the clients and it would also cover the restaurants. But one of the things that we found really interesting was when we went and visited one of the restaurants and we were sitting there, we didn't think that the usage of this would be so high, but every single individual was coming in and even before they were asked to scan themselves in and give that contact information for the contact tracing, people were just getting it. They were just signing themselves in, putting their information in, and now kind of everybody's covered and there's full transparency into how to handle a situation where potentially you're at that restaurant at the same time as someone who ends up having symptoms later.
So talk to me about building this in Innisfil. You mentioned that you were part of the DMZ even before the company came together. What is that support and that infrastructure meant for your ability to be able to even launch this? I mean, obviously the town is your prime customer, but being able to be there and have that support in the first place had to have been really critical. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, there's really two big pieces that DMZ Innisfil has really given us. Number one is the mentorship. The mentorship has been absolutely fantastic. We've got to interface with some really great people from Toronto, from Barrie, from all over the GTA, really. And they've given us so much insight into how governments work or how businesses work, helped us break down some of the problems we're facing. It's just a sounding board, as you said earlier, just another person to chat with about ideas. And that really gave us a good grasp of what we were doing. And it allowed us to work through problems with just more than myself and Roy. And the other piece that it's really given us is beyond Innisfil being a customer, I think the relationship that we have with them and the level of transparency and feedback, and we set up weekly meetings with them, it's absolutely incredible. I don't think it's so normal to have such a great relationship with a municipality like that. And it's really been something that's helped us a lot. We're not really building for them, we're building with them. And that's been the really beautiful part of it all.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was thinking about you guys trying to expand out and bring in other municipalities for a product that it kind of sells itself, at least from my viewpoint, but we're a little bit younger, and I just think about other municipalities with a less forward-thinking mentality that are sort of stuck in that pre-digital thinking. It might be a harder sell. And I wonder if you've run into that wall a little bit, and just to compare and contrast that with what you're dealing with in Innisfail.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to do is to actually, I mean, as Tristan mentioned earlier, like the click happens when you actually see the product in action. When we demo it to somebody, that's when their brain starts running with it and they realize the capabilities that you can bring to this, the value you can drive. You see the text appear on your phone and it's targeted to you and it's specific and it's fast. That's when people really get what we're doing. But explaining it and trying to advertise it, it doesn't work. It doesn't click the same way. So I think one of the challenges we've had so far, like one of them to name a few, has been having other municipalities see what we're doing before we've actually launched it. So the public launch is coming up in early 2021. And we're hoping that that's going to be kind of a great test case, other potential clients to see what this can do for their communities and how this can help their residents communicate better with their governments.
You mentioned that there's other potential stumbling blocks going forward and trying to grow this thing and bring in other communities. What are those? Like, I know there's the known knowns and the unknown knowns, or whatever the hell that is. But what, as you look out here over the next year, 3 years, 5 years, what do you see as the potential stumbling blocks here?
Yeah, I think one of them also is just navigating the government procurement process. It's very different than selling to customers off the street, or maybe you're selling an app to consumers. Like that stuff has very low friction to adoption. In the government space, it's a completely different game. There's procurement, it takes a long time, sales cycles are longer. It's very much something that you have to consistently work at over the long term if you want to get adoption. And for us, really, the challenge there is laying down those systems, really understanding how these processes work so that over time, if we keep at it long enough, like we can scale. So that was one that comes to my mind.
Yeah, on the same topic, each municipality has their own bylaws for procurement. So they follow general guidelines, but you really have to get to know each municipality themselves, right? We spend a lot of time reading and understanding each municipality before we even approach them. And that way we have a better understanding of what are their capabilities, how do they operate, and how we can even approach them. And getting a deeper perspective like that is the only way forward through this. So it becomes very time consuming, and we become very focused on quality and targeting certain municipalities. It's not like we could put out a Facebook ad and spray and pray and try to get a bunch of people excited about it. It's not the same game. It's much more relationship based. It's much more slow and methodical.
So much of the tech space is dominated by disruptive thinking, that kind of model of breaking up old bureaucratic structures, et cetera, as opposed to, big government, for example. But you're kind of in this strange space where you're trying to be innovative and developing, but your primary customers are those old big governments and the bureaucratic structures. So it's a tough thing to try and balance, isn't it? Do you foresee yourself kind of continuing to work in this kind of local government space or is this just one of many potential companies going forward, do you think, as you look out into your career?
I think it's hard to say. I think Tristan and I have, so far it's been like an enormously rewarding experience. Like I don't think we can wait until we can launch this and see the actual value it can bring to the community, and then however it goes is however it goes.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems out there to solve, and we're certainly always open to learning more and understanding what we can do to help fix things in this world. But in this case, we've really fallen in love with local government. It's really nice to see, like, these are the people who are hands-on, in and out. They often live in the same municipality that they work, and they really care about what they do. It's something that's really unique, and it's something that we've kind of fallen in love with. So we'll probably be headed down this path for a while, but you never know where life takes you.
Well, yeah, when you said falling in love with local government, it's true. Like, it's the government that's closest to the people and like most affects their lives, at least in a day-to-day basis. And to make that more effective and more understandable, I think is a really admirable goal and something that you can really see technology changing much for the better. So I think you guys have really identified a great space to be in, and it's great that Innisfail has been giving you that support.
Yeah, and we've seen firsthand how hard they work. We came in, we started building our relationships at probably one of the most challenging times for local governments, just navigating these digital transformations. Nobody can come into the office. Like they run these towns, but they're not even in the same room as each other. Like, it's amazing how much work goes on behind the scenes, and getting a little insight into what's going on there and being able to support that. As I said before, it's been like unbelievably rewarding. I didn't know how much really goes on behind the scenes to deliver so much to residents.
Well, I think because a lot of people just think it's boring, right? The only old way to get in touch with town council was to go to the town council meeting, or maybe read a blurb in the local paper when there were local papers, or the local radio station. And to try to change that model where people really are getting up-to-date information about what's happening and being able to engage in that process, you could really see like a really revolutionary potential there, I think.
Yeah, and one of the things I think we're looking forward towards is this two-way communication, giving the residents a voice as well, and making that, as efficient as possible for both parties. I think, again, like the way we developed the product was in this two-way relationship where we were getting feedback and iterating it. There's no reason why a government can't be more down to earth with their residents, hearing what they want and iterating on that too. So it's like you're bringing in information travel processes, and you're increasing them, and it just makes everything so much better. It allows you to quickly identify what problems are happening and quickly patch them up in the community that otherwise would have taken, again, a letter that might take a week and a half or have to wait till the next council meeting. And stuff happens faster than that.
So mostly it's just been you two guys building this so far. Do you want to bring on additional help? And talk to me about that process. So when will you be ready for that, and in terms of scaling up and actually hiring staff and stuff?
Well, first things first, we want to make sure it works in Innisfil. And once we're through that process and we've successfully launched the pilot, then the next question becomes is how can we make this happen in other towns? And to build great things, you need great people. So we're looking towards hiring some of our first employees, hopefully over the next few months, probably on the software development side to continue to build out a really great product. And then from there, kind of see how it goes, building out more of the other teams that would be critical to making this function.
Are you in the right place to be able to find people to work with in and around the DMZ again? Like you talked about how like just having that mentorship was so important, but in terms of like finding additional help, is this the right place to be to find that help, do you think?
Yeah, I think Tristan and I got really lucky because we're tapped into some unique networks. So number one is this DMZ network. There's great talent to be found through the companies that are at the DMZ and our mentors. But also, we're still very close to the ground at university. There's a lot of really bright people that we go to class with, have great talents, and are also like-minded, looking to build. So I think we're in a good spot to find some really bright people that can see our mission statement. If it resonates with them, hop on board.
I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not the best software developer in the world. But I would certainly hire anyone I admire, right? And there's people in school with me right now that I've seen do incredible things. And if they're open to, helping us, build the future of government communications, we're absolutely on board.
Tristan, Roy, I wish you the best of luck, and thanks for making time for me.
Thanks so much.
You can learn more about Communicaty by clicking the link in the show description. There you'll get access to bonus content and our weekly newsletter. Innisfail Accelerates is a program sponsored by the Town of Innisfil. You can learn more about how they can help support your great business idea at innisfailaccelerates.ca. You'll get access to bonus content and our weekly newsletter. Innisfail Accelerates is a program sponsored by the Town of Innisfil. You can learn more about how they can help support your great business idea at innisfailaccelerates.ca.